minute CLE. Sorry, yeah, so recording has started. Today's CLE is 90 minutes. It is 1.5 hours of general CLE for Florida. And we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. I'll describe myself a little bit, but this is actually brought to you by the AILA Central Florida chapter. I am Andrea Reyes, and I run the practice management committee for the Central Florida chapter. And so I've worked with Ruby in the past and some other CLEs, and I thought it would be a really great start to host our bi-monthly CLEs and have her as our first guest speaker. So today we're gonna introduce you guys. I mean, she probably does not need an introduction, but Ruby Powers, she is based out of Texas. She's a board certified immigration attorney. And the reason she's been invited here, aside from all the wonderful things that she is able to contribute, is that she is the amazing author of the AILA published book called Build and Manage Your Successful Immigration Law Practice Without Losing Your Mind. But that's actually one of her most recent accomplishments. That was a 2019 publication. She has been very involved in AILA National, specifically the practice management committees, for many years. She was actually the practice management chair between 2015 and 2017 for Houston. And so she just has a lot of great ideas, and we're very excited to have her here. So thank you, Ruby, for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with everyone. And, just to keep the conversation going, I started a Facebook group, which I'll put a link to later on, called Power Up Your Practice, and do monthly webinars on different law practice management topics. And so it's great. I'm grateful to be invited today. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, wonderful. So as I stated, my name is Andrea Reyes. Hopefully you guys have not heard of me, but heard of my practice management conference. For the past 3 years, I have done a national practice management conference in Orlando, Florida. Last year, we actually, because of COVID, we actually combined it with our chapter, our Central Florida chapter conference. But we are very excited because we actually have details for the future on that as well. So you probably have seen me on Facebook posting all over the Facebook pages, but I'm very excited to be here. I've sat on the board for Central Florida chapter for about 5 years. I'm now actually the Jacksonville Regional Vice Chair, as well as the chair of the Practice Management Committee. So very excited to be putting these programs together for you. And at the end, you'll see we have a bunch of events also planned and lined up for you guys. So hopefully you can mark your calendars for those events. Okay, so we're just gonna go ahead and dive right in. Like I said, Ruby is the author of the first comprehensive practice management book that's been published by AILA. There have been other authors, of course, but not as comprehensive as this book. So Ruby, tell us a little bit about how did you end up writing AILA's first comprehensive, practice management book?
Well, okay, where do we go? I came from a long line of entrepreneurs. My one-sided grandparents were missionaries, the other were farmers. My dad had a shower fixture and mirror business. I had one aunt that was the only attorney in my family. So I had a lot of entrepreneurs, and I saw a lot of the struggles they went through trying to figure out marketing, operations, all of the different things that they had to do. And I just was, when I started my practice, which I was very excited to do in 2009, a certain percentage out of necessity and a lot because I had been looking forward to having my own business. I was reading Jay Finberg's Start and Build, or I forget exactly the title of his book. And I pretty much had devoured it, but I had found that a lot of it didn't seem applicable, or it'd been outdated or something, as much as I respect the book, I felt like I needed something a little bit more, and there wasn't something on par. And so I just was talking to lots of people, joining business groups, reading a lot of business groups and business books. And I'd been talking with Reed Trouts, and it was it really should be a book. I really want to write a book. And then, we basically had a conversation for almost a whole year about it. And then one summer, it's let's just do this. And so we had to hash out some little details. But then as soon as we did, because it's really one of the few of its kind in the AILA publications, because everything else is more on substantive law. You got Kurzban, you got asylum, you have waivers, you have, what have you. And so this whole law practice management, as much as it's needed, it hadn't really been done. And we'd had, like you said, there was I think the tool book or cookbook, I don't know, there was like a lot of different ones that were sort of a aggregation of of articles. And when I was on the law practice management committee for AILA, I was on that committee for 4 years. We just churned out articles all the time. So when I did put pen to paper and start writing, I had already written on a lot of different topics. Part of the struggle was just maybe working on the title of contents and sort of, getting started.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also had to write it like in a relatively quick time frame, didn't you?
Yeah, it was sort of funny because I went to the Texas Fall Conference in Costa Rica that I helped organize about law practice management and self-care, and in like November 2018. And that's why the intro, there's a section about zip lining because I literally had just zip lines and was like scared out for my life at that conference. And then I pretty much wrote it from November 2018 to about March 2019, but it was putting some finishing touches into like May, early June of 2019. So yeah, but a lot of the research had already been done because I had devoured a ton of books and a lot of the hard knocks of putting things together and reading and learning and making mistakes. But it also was, when it started coming together, just like I was on a tight schedule to put it together.
Yeah, but you also have like a lot of experience, right? Because I mean, we'll get to that in a little bit, but I want to hear all about Dubai because you definitely had to learn some remoteness and think very quickly on how to become remote and how to run a practice from a whole different country. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but in this process that you've been writing this book, I mean, when you wrote this book, you were already, I think you told me, right, you were at 10 years of practicing. So you had already had a lot of experience yourself, 4 years on AILA National's Practice Management Committee, writing, reading, learning, teaching. So without giving too much away too early on, right, because we have 90 minutes, what do you think has been like your biggest personal lesson for you?
Oh, that's hard to distill in just a couple of words, but I would say that a lot of this stuff has been done before, and don't try to reinvent the wheel. And, there's some things that stay constant and there's some things that change. And that's part of the trick, is figuring out what's the constant and what's the changing with the times and being agile and adapting. And I think one of the other biggest things about running a business is, when do you do something on your own and when do you hire for help?
And we're going to touch up on that. There's a whole section we're going to touch up on that. It's very important stuff.
There's some, I guess, the big picture thoughts that come to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, folks, so we know that you're logging in. We have about 41 participants. So all my participants, please change your names to your correct names. When you click on your name, there's a little link that says more, and you can rename it there. And the reason that's important is because remember that we're going to be raffling off one book. If we get to 100 participants, Ruby, I will raffle 2 books. Okay, I will raffle 2 books, but we have to get to 100. So but we are going to be raffling at the end of our presentation one of these amazing books from Ruby, Build and Manage Your Successful Immigration Law Practice. So you do have to be present to participate. Unfortunately, if you have to leave, we're sorry, but it is one of those live participant situations. So moving along. So we are, where'd I go? So just to kind of, I'm going to leave this here. We're not going to go into depth about the book, but the reason why I wanted to kind of break it down for you guys to see what this book is about is because I've actually referred this book to like a bunch of my friends who've asked me for practice management help. The first thing I say is refer to this book, right? And it's just because it's so comprehensive. And as you can see, it's got a bunch of different chapters on different things. And in this presentation, as we talk, we're going to reference certain chapters. So it's good to kind of have, if you have the book, or in the future, if you're going to buy the book, or if you win the book, right, at least you know some of these things that we're talking about today, where to reference it in the book. Okay. So they say, right, if you want to learn something, you have to teach it. So how did this apply to you when you were writing your book? I mean, I know that, again, as the ALAB practice management chair, you know, you had to do a lot of reading and writing, but you also had to go like learn it the tough way, right? Tell us about Dubai.
Well, what happened with Dubai was I started my firm in November 2009. And again, if you set the scene, you know, we had just gone through the Great Recession. We're still, you know, we still sort of had that cloud above us between like 2008, 2010, you know, or so. So you never know when you really get done with that. And so I was laid off 2 times in November 2009. I started my firm the next day after the second layoff. I went and registered, and like I was like, first thing I did, it was like, I'm ready for this. And so I took it in stride and was excited, actually. So my husband had said that he wanted to be assigned abroad with his company. And I was just thinking, well, you know, there's no point in me signing a 5 or 10 year lease, or, you know, or 3 or 5 year lease. I really don't want to go get a huge copier lease. I don't want to have too much of expenses, because I don't know if we're going to pick up and leave. And so in a way, that was my framework of mind of sort of keeping myself, I sort of like on a bootstrap, or on building the firm on a shoestring type of mentality. And that actually worked out, because a lot of my friends who went off and got big office spaces and copiers and big pretty furniture, most of them were out of business by the time a couple years later. And so I had already had a pretty much a frugal upbringing, and that's really how it kept me going. And so that was my mentality. So fast forward, my husband, well, it was a bit crazy. It was the Arab Spring. I had just had a baby in January 2011, and my husband
took a job busy
in Dubai. Yeah. So my first baby was my law firm. My second was my first human-born child, and so I landed in not a snowstorm. A sandstorm. I landed in a sandstorm with a 6-month-old on my hip in Dubai. And I'm so glad I had reach outs, because I basically was I only had like 2 months notice that I was going to Dubai. And I said to him, like, what do I do? You know, what am I gonna, you know? And then we just sort of sat down there and sort of like thought it out logically, like, well, you know, I'm going to have to leverage technology. I'm just going to have to. So I put in off my assistant in an executive suite. My assistant told me, she's like, well, you're going to have to call all of your clients, and you're going to have to ask them if they want to stay with you. And I said, no, I'm going to call all my clients and tell them this is what's going to happen. And I didn't lose anybody. Everybody stayed with me. And I had a presence in Houston, and then I was working virtually from Dubai, which was a 10 and 11 hour time difference. And, you know, I think because this happened so early on, I couldn't just run to, you know, Houston to do something. I had to communicate with my assistant on a regular basis. I had one assistant at the time. We had to leverage technology. I only came back to the US 1 time in 14 months. Imagine everybody who's running their firm sort of quasi remotely, and you could just run to your office occasionally. Mm-hmm. I didn't get the chance to do that. It would have been like thousands of dollars and a huge ordeal for me to come back to my office. But, you know, I leveraged technology and I pivoted. I found my weaknesses and I figure out what my strengths were. I could do consultations and interview preps on Sundays, because Sunday was the weekday in Dubai. And I was able to work with people's timelines. They liked the fact that they didn't have to dress up and find parking and come to my building. You know, this was a decade ago, and we used Skype, Dropbox, and we just sort of leveraged technology as much as possible. So when, you know, 10 years later, when we did when COVID happened, it really was second nature, and everything in between, the bookends between, I really still kept that sort of that frugal, adaptive, high leverage tech mentality.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, so remember, guys, I think I put in the chat there how to change your names. Just go to the participants at the bottom, click on your name, select more, and then rename. Okay. So
Do you want me to tell you a little bit about the chapters real quick?
yeah, well, you
Yeah.
can absolutely
Yeah.
tell us a little bit.
I mean, one thing I'll just say is that I think the mission, the vision, mission, and plan is so important. And I didn't see that very often in books. Like when I wrote this and I put the table of contents together, I looked at a lot of other books and I was trying to find commonalities and what was missing. And that was one that's missing. The other thing about all the different roles that comes through a lot through inspiration from E-Myth Revisited, which is a favorite book. I did the like getting started. It's more of like a quick start guide. If you needed to start your firm tomorrow, this is what you needed to do. And so that's, you know, a lot of people either they get laid off or they, you know, for some reason it's abrupt or they just like go out on a whim and say, I'm going to hang a shingle. That's a good place to go. The other thing I saw that a lot of them didn't have was about customer service and lawyer as manager. Time management, I wrote like I think 20 pages just on time management, and that was me digesting a whole bunch of time management books that I think are very applicable to our employees as well, not just ourselves. And then the technology. When I talked to Funberg about it, I said, "Why don't you have anything on technology?" And he said, "Well, it's always changing." I didn't want to write a chapter on that. And I was like, well, you know, I think you still could talk about the concepts of technology and how to make that work. So, and then I put a whole chapter on self-care because I didn't see that anywhere else. And that was just something that I feel like we needed. So.
And I mean, it's wonderful. I love seeing that there because definitely I feel like in the last couple of years, we've started to see a much more attention to this self-care practice. When we actually, the Central Florida chapter actually now has a mental health committee led by one of our South Florida attorneys, Laura Kelly. So we're very excited to have that as well. All right, so we're gonna go into best practice management tips, right? This is one of the things that when we were preparing for this, right? In your process of writing this book, right? In your process of being a business consultant for so many businesses, you know, I know that you've seen and heard a lot of different struggles, right? People have dealt with different issues at different times, different complications. So knowing what these struggles generally tend to be, what would you say would be the top 5 tips you could give the average Joe, right? So this is like someone who can be anywhere in their practice management journey of owning their business. What are like the tips that stand out to you the most in terms of like how to make it work?
Okay, well, this is definitely hard, and I might not have summarized everything into 5, but these are some of the top 5 that come to mind. So the first one is know your strengths and weaknesses. That's really important. If you get overwhelmed very easily, if your attention to detail or your lack of attention to detail, if you avoid conflict, if you don't like delegating, if you are not a clear communicator. And so, you know, these are really things that you need to know about yourself. And I think it's just life is a journey of figuring out ourselves, honestly. And if we try to figure this out too late in the game, then we miss the mark. Like if you start seeing trends about, you know, what happens around you, you know, you got to question, what did you have to impact those things? So and you do like an assessment, right? To figure out the weaknesses. Why don't you tell us about that?
Oh my goodness. So it's actually like and I preach about it all the time because it's changed both my personal and my professional life. We did, I have my own business consultant, and we'll talk about the different levels of consulting in a little bit, but I do have a business consultant here in Jacksonville, and we've done a couple of retreats with my office. We do personal, you know, I do personal monthly meetings with him. And then he does meetings with my team members. So, I mean, there's, again, different levels that we'll talk about in a little bit, but something that we did right in the beginning of 2020, right before the pandemic and everything happened, right? The whole world kind of like shut down, we did a retreat with the personality assessment called Gallup Strength Finders. And if you've ever done personality assessments, I mean, I know some people think it's a little kooky, but I don't know. This was one of the most accurate personality assessments I've done. And it allowed me to not only understand the way that I process and the way that I think, but it also allowed me to understand the way that my team members process and the way that they think. And a lot of the things that I thought were working for my office were not working, right? That, like in my head, they were working. And I thought I was moving along as if they were working, but everybody else was stuck, or they felt unheard, or they felt like they didn't have a voice. And so that was a really big eye opener for me. And it really, you know, it's a learning curve, and it's a never ending process where you're continuously trying to evolve and to be better and to do better. But it has to start somewhere, right? And the communication and the conversation has to start somewhere. And so these assessments are a really, really excellent way of knowing, you know, who you are, what your strengths are, and then how those strengths interplay with, you know, other people's strengths, so that you can have the most effective and efficient communication. And so, you know, if you know me, you know, I'm very big on the team concept, very big on team building. And this was like a game changer for us.
That's really important, and to know not just about yourself, but also your team members. And lots of people do like the colors, the Myers-Briggs, or there's the Profile XT, there's the DISC assessment. You can do lots of different things. And I mean, if you just know a lot of like the weaknesses, you've got to also decide, is this something I'm ever going to be good at? Or should I just, you know, or I need to, like, if let's say it's management, and you really do need to be a good manager, but at some point you get yourself to a certain point, it's sort of like a muscle that you need to strengthen, but then you also could hire for somebody who's better at it and who can strengthen you. And so those are, sometimes you have to figure out, you know, how that works, and whether you know, whether it's worth overcoming, how much to overcome, and when to hire for it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. All right, so we're having a technical issue with the name situation. Ruby, do you know how to change it on the webinar? How to change the name on the webinar?
It's because you were given that one link, that's my assistant's name, and so basically, if you came in through that one link, then you all entered with that Selah Ortega name. So, you know, if you can't figure out how to,
there's some people that did enter without that have their name. I
registered the proper, the other way. I can just, if you can't figure out how to, let's see, if you can't figure out how to change your name by renaming it, then if you really want to, you could go to this and register, and then you'll log in as yourself. But I mean, I don't want to disrupt us from continuing forward. But if you don't know how to go to more and then rename yourself, then you could register at the link below and then enter that way. And then we'll keep recording. There's no option under more. Okay.
Yeah, I think they're saying that there is no option under more.
Okay. Well, I think that we there maybe need to find another way to do the raffle, or something like that.
Yeah, so there's 3 dots on the more. There is no option on there for changing the name on the webinar. So at the bottom where there's the 3 dots, it says more. Okay, there's no more option. Got it.
Okay, I don't know how to change that. So you could,
other people, yeah. Okay, so we can, this is being recorded, so it's not a problem. If you guys wanna use the link that, if you wanna use the link that Ruby just sent down there and then log back in, you're good to go. This is gonna be recorded no matter what. Okay, so we will continue. All right.
All right. So, all right. So another big thing too. So I mean, we'll find another way to do the raffle if we have to, but if you can try to register on the link I put in there. And and or else this is recorded, so we'll just continue. So the second really key point is I think you need to write out your processes, and that comes from eMyth Revisited talks about how you want to try to make your firm more like more like a franchise. And so when you first read that book, I'm like, well, how can a law firm be like a franchise? Well, you can have everything templatized. You can have the your welcome emails, your how to schedule a consultation emails, like everything you can have written out. You can have your script even. You can put as much as here, I'm going to put the link one more time.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. And you can put all your procedures, like what happens from a contact to a consultation, what happens in the consultation, what happens when you're onboarding a new client. All of that needs to be written. And what percentage of your firm, I like to ask this question, let's put in the chat, what percentage of your firm would you say your procedures are written up? Because is it more like 0? Is it 20, 30, 40, 100? Thanks. Yeah, we got 15, 20. Because this is what we should be getting to, writing out these procedures. I hired a consultant a long time ago, and she was sort of the Six Sigma Toyota production systems mentality. And she had me write out everything we do. And then we would look at it and write it and just sort of like we'd see if there was any bottlenecks or if there was redundancies. And it was like eye-opening, because when I did that experiment, what I found out was some of the stuff I thought we were doing, we weren't doing. Some of the things they were doing, sort of went rogue somewhere, because it was just sort of like this, what's those old Greek mythology or whatever, like somebody told somebody something for like many millennia. And then, it's like telephone. And then what you think is being done is not really being done. So right. To be all of that in summary is write out your processes and get to that point, delegate it so that people in your firm are helping you do it, so you don't have to do it all yourself. And I know that you're really big into that as well. And there's a lot of programs that can help you. You can just use a good old Google Docs or Word, or you can use, there's like Suite Process. There's lots of different programs out there if you wanted to leverage, but write out your procedures, look at them, and make sure that you take a look at them on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's a continuous process. It doesn't, just because you do it one time doesn't mean, that you're good to go. You're going to outgrow it. You're going to have individuals that are going to have different strengths that are going to help you, make it better. It's going to be edited. The times are going to change. We're going to become remote, so it's an evolving process of this. Writing out is something that never stops or should never stop. Okay. So point number 3, what is our best practice management tip that you've seen from what people struggle with?
I think you should be patient with yourself. It's like an ongoing process, and there's lots of changing. Like I said, there's the what stays the same and what changes. And you're evolving. You're evolving as a business owner, as a leader, as a manager, as an attorney. You're wearing so many different hats. Don't beat yourself up. Just surround yourself with positive people. I guess I'm stealing from my 4th tip, actually. So the 3 is be patient with yourself, but always be trying to improve. And I mean, my 4th point would be seeking out advice, mentors, others who are successful. That was one of the things my law professor told me a long time ago, was like, find out somebody who's where you want to be in 10, 15, 20 years, and ask them, how did they get there? What they would do differently? Are they proud of, would they have done something different? What was one of their biggest pieces of advice that they learned? And so, seeking out advice, that could be reading and winning or buying or reading my book. This could be reading other business books. This could be joining Goldman Sachs 10,000 Businesses, which was a really great program I did about 6 years ago. This could be taking retreats. This could hiring a consultant. This could be in a business owner group that in different perspectives. So yeah, this is just I would say that there's a lot of times when I've had consultees and say, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known this years ago. And I'm like, yeah, and same thing for me, like sometimes that's why a book can be worth thousands of millions of dollars sometimes, because if an idea can transform how you do things. And so that's why you have to constantly be learning.
Yeah.
And then my fifth tip, which is sort of a little boring, but I think I'm just going to say it because it's something that was really big for my firm this last year and a half, is make sure you're closing your cases.
Yes.
Don't let them balloon or mushroom into these tons of files that you're like, oh my gosh, they haven't been scanned, haven't been shredded. And you have to find out what's what makes sense for your state bar. But like for Texas, for example, we just have to have the IOLTA, the retainer details for 5 years, but we don't have a certain amount of time we have to hold on to the file. And I think along those same lines, you should be finding ways to make your firm as paperless as possible. And I was even asked today from somebody saying, well, how, which mail do you shred? What do you keep? And, that's basically, we're reverse engineering, having closed about 400 cases those last year and a half. And now we're not even opening to physical files except for court. And whenever mail comes in, we have a system to what gets shredded and after being scanned, obviously, and what to keep. So those are just things that was more of like a practical tip, but.
No, and I agree, because I have the same issue with my office. We just went through the same thing of purging all our closed cases, just because it was so much. It was so much, and it's a lot of work if you save it to the last minute. Okay, I'm trying to put my PowerPoint back up. I got disconnected for a second. Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so we did our top tips. So again, sounds very simple and very basic, but there's so much knowledge behind here, right? Knowing your strengths or weaknesses, writing out your processes, being patient with yourself, seeking out advice, specifically mentors, understanding that it's okay to be vulnerable, and closing out your cases as you finish them. All right, so now we go into, where and how to begin the process of organizing your business, right? So I think this is where like a lot of people it doesn't matter if you're starting off new, if you've been practicing for a few years, or if you've been practicing for a very long time. So what is one of the biggest misconceptions that you come across, Ruby?
Sorry, there's like some lightning storm. I've got this great view of lightning in front of me right now. Sorry, it's a teeny bit distracting. I think one of the things, biggest misconception, this conversation, what we're doing here can be used for somebody who hasn't started, who just started their firm, or somebody who's had it for 20, 30, 40 years. I've had people in my retreats who had their firm 30 years and we're just having like aha moments. Light bulbs were going off every minute because they're like, whoa, because what happens is we get in these silos. We just sort of see what we see, and it's lonely in running a firm. And sometimes we're too proud to ask for help. And so, I think that thinking that it's too late to start something, or I've been practicing long enough, I can't, what is that, old dog can't learn new trick or something, I don't know, whatever, we don't call ourselves an old dog, but you know what I mean, like that we can't adapt and change. And what we saw under COVID was that we all had to adapt, whether we wanted to or not.
Yeah.
So that was a really key point. I think the other things can be that just the importance of knowing why you're doing what you're doing is really important.
Yeah, and so we talk about, right, your mission and vision, and that's something that you brought up, and you stated, right, that when you started writing this book, it's something that you saw a lot of firms didn't have. And so, for any organization, whether it's for business or a nonprofit, having, your so what is your mission and your vision, right? like your vision is what you want to be known for externally or internally, right? And internally, or what you want people to, or in other words, what you want people to say about you. And then your mission is what you do every day, or what would not be happening if if your organization did not exist, right? So think of it in those terms. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could be something very simple as, helping immigrants live stable lives, right? It can be something very simple. So talk to us about the quick start guide.
Yeah, and just to go back to a lot of times when I do my retreats or I talk to folks in there, say they never really thought about their mission or vision. And I talk about it in terms of, you go to school and you want to get into a better school, and you want to go into college, and you want to get into law school, and you need to take an LSAT. Like we're all very goal oriented. And then we're like, we need to start, we need to get a job, or we want to buy a house, or we need a blah, blah, blah. And it's like very easy to just say, okay, there's something in front of you. There's always like another goal. But some of the times is that at some point we maybe stop making these goals, and we might not also decide why are we doing what we're doing with our firm. And so that's why the mission and the vision, it's not just about for us, it's also about a rallying cry for a lodestar for the rest of your business, your staff, as well as it helps develop culture. And it also helps you communicate that and make decisions for the rest of what you do, from what type of office furniture you have to how do you market to your staff, to your potential clients. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add, and I think that's a very valid point, because so you should be checking this every year, right? When you meet with your office, when you do retreats at the your end of the year analysis, or your beginning of the year analysis, whatever, however you organize your business structure, because I think for a lot of people, and we hear this a lot in some of the Facebook forums, right? Like a lot of people are burnt out and don't want to do immigration anymore, or don't want to do a specific section of immigration anymore. So, and that's okay. You are allowed to change your mind, right? But then make sure that what you're doing matches what you want to do, because, if like they say, right, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And sometimes these cases, right? I mean, if we're being honest, they can be very burdensome. They can be very cumbersome. They can be very painful. So just make sure that you're constantly checking this, right? Because it can change, and you can change, and your choices can change. So definitely keep that conversation always going with yourself and with your office.
Yeah, and don't be upset if you change your mind about something. Right. It's okay. About the quick start guide, I mean, like that's just pretty much like, email, computers, website, what to consider when you were to start a business or firm. And you've already had your firm for a while, but you haven't thought about, maybe you jumped into it really quickly, and you need to go back and sort of analyze what your needs are for your business. So make sure that you take a look at that. Maybe you don't have a website, or you don't have social media. So sometimes people sort of jump ahead, and they maybe need to go back and fill in the blanks.
Absolutely. All right. And then self-assessments. I mean, we talk about, oftentimes we talk about holding other people accountable, but how often do we hold ourselves accountable? How often do we assess ourselves? How often do we reflect on who we are and what we want to do? From a leadership standpoint, right? Like I fundamentally believe, like you cannot be a leader if you don't know how to follow. You cannot be a leader, unless you understand the strengths and weaknesses of everyone in your team. And so these assessments, and actually the book that Ruby's book here has a self-assessment section in each chapter. It's very interactive to kind of get you thinking, get the juices flowing, right, about that specific topic. But definitely it's a good start to understand like where you are at to where you want to be.
So I did I was in Vistage for a little while, and I did this Profile XT, which I think I wrote about in the book, this assessment. And it was very fascinating to me because one of the things I took away was my energy level was really high. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, because but learning about myself was really fascinating, because I sort of knew, but I didn't know. but what anyway, it was sort of like higher on the higher spectrum than most people. But then when I was interviewing somebody one time, their resume looked awesome and they came in, or, this was back in in-person interview. And there was just something off about the person. I couldn't figure out what it was. And the consultant who had taught me about Profile XT said, well, your energy level is so high, you're a 9 out of 10, that your EA has to be at least a 7, because if they're too many notches below you, they'll drive you crazy. You just won't, it will be hard to explain it, but they'll just, you're just, and I was like, oh my gosh. So it's not just about doing these assessments. It's for you to know your strengths and weaknesses. It's also to help you make good hires. And once that experiment taught me so much, because I was like, because a lot of times we're just sort of haphazardly trying to hire and fill roles and we can't figure out what it is. And that gave me so much more depth, that situation. And that Profile XT also helped me from hiring the wrong associates. There was one that was like a 1 on independence, and I was like out of 10, and I was like, I need somebody who can make decisions on their own and not have to come to me all the time for approval. And, those are some of the things that can really take a lot of the efforts out of, learning the hard way. And so we've talked a lot about that, but I do a DISC assessment for all of my new potential hires and a Profile XT for associates.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so auditing our firm, right? So the self-assessment really is about auditing ourselves. And then the audit of the firm is just, right, I call them temperature checks at my office, where I check in with my different teams, go over, review a process. So, there's different things that need to be audited, right? Again, when you run a business, there's so many different moving pieces. You have employees, you have finances, you have marketing, you have HR, you have, and that's just internally, right? That's not even dealing with processes for clients and communications with clients and all that stuff. So how do you set up an audit for your firm?
Well, I think you can sort of break it into all the different processes. And so you can think about, well, first of all, there's the different areas, right? There's the processes. So, everything from a contact to a consultation, what happens in the consultation, what happens from consultation to being hired. And then when a case is open, what happens from there to closing. You can even be writing out everything in terms of marketing as well, which is another area, but those processes should also be written up. You're going to thank yourself when you have new people or somebody leaves abruptly. Even when people give 2 weeks notice or so, you still got to do the normal job. Then you got to find the new people, and then you have to train them. It still takes like a month, even in an ideal situation. So having those processes, it also ensures like quality and consistency. You don't want one assistant or doing this thing and another doing another thing. So, HR, you need to make sure that you have those procedures written up. What is a template for a job a posting? What questions do you ask? Who asks what questions? When do you bring them up to you to do the final interview? You want to make sure that you have those procedures. And I'll tell you what happens is a lot of times you're just like, I sort of say, maybe it's because I grew up on a farm for a little teeny bit, like a chicken with your head cut off. And so you don't want to be like that when you're hiring. That expression, you want to fire fast and
hire slow, fire fast, and that's on
exactly,
here.
Right, exactly. Hire slow, fire fast. Exactly. So the hiring part, you want to be slow. You don't want to be like, oh my God, they breathe. They can do this job. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you get the right person. So you need to have those procedures in place, because if you do, then you'll lend yourself, you'll lean into those, and you won't be as freaked out when you're maybe in a shortage of and then the marketing, you want to have those things. You have a branding templates, you have where you post things, when you post things, you have we have templates for social media posts, we have templates for newsletter. for announcements. You want to have those things written up. It drives me crazy when it feels like we're writing something from scratch when I know we have a template or something like a template somewhere. And so make sure that those are written up, and then you can just keep expanding on them year after year and improving upon them. And financials, you need to know what those certain numbers are that tells you whether you're doing well or not. Like, it's basically, you're the captain of your ship, and you need to be able to have all those numbers and reports up in front of you to know how to proceed, and you need to have the right information. If you're not being provided the right information, or you're not asking for the right information, or your staff's not putting it together for you, then you won't be able to make informed, guided decisions.
Right. And so for me, right, like, again, and we're going to talk a little bit about knowing thyself, but like, when I started my practice, like, I knew I was good with administration. I knew I was good with organization. I knew I was like, I love Excel spreadsheets. I can create a formula out of anything, but I don't understand, all the money and the IRS stuff. So I was like, the first thing that I ever had, the first consultant that I ever hired, or the first contractor that I ever hired was a CPA. Because I knew that that's not one of my strengths. And so I it's the first thing I did. But all right, so now we're gonna move along, because we are running a little bit behind schedule. Let me see over here. Right, so again, the references to the book, right, chapters 1 through 5 kind of go over all these things in really good detail. So the question, right, then becomes, do we do it ourselves, or do we hire a consultant, right? And I think this is a conversation that people have, and it's a conflict that they constantly have, but like, really, it can be both, right? And we're gonna talk a little bit about that. But when you first started your practice, Ruby, well, let's go over here, right? So know thyself. And this is something that I say this almost in every practice management event that I host, right? Audit who you are as a person, because who you are as a person is going to determine who you are as a technician, who you are as a manager, and who you are as an entrepreneur. So Ruby goes into the book. In the book, she talks about this, right? But so the technician is, it's being the competent lawyer who's able to give sound legal advice, right? You're the worker bee. The manager is, the individual that manages the daily operations, including clients and employees. And the entrepreneur, right, has to think long-term, be open to changes and trends in technology, and foremost, ensure that they're working on the business and not just in the business, right? So we talk about this a lot in practice management, working on the business versus working in the business. And I love in your book, Ruby, you state, the entrepreneur has to live in the future, thrive on change, and see opportunities in events. And I think that if we weren't all entrepreneurs prior to COVID-19, we probably all of us are at this point, right? So when you first started your practice, right, 10 years ago or 11 years ago, which of the three was your weakest? Like, how did you overcome that?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I didn't make this up. This is all from like E-Myth Revisited. And so if you want to read that book, that's a great resource. And I'll put a link to some really good books I suggest in the chat in a second. But, the ones that gives us the confidence to have our own business is the technician side. Like, I'm a lawyer, I can do that. But, the funny thing is I'd only interned at lots of places. I'd only been a lawyer for 1 year. So I was trying to learn everything like at the same time, that expression, like build a plane and take off at the same time. I feel like that's pretty common as immigration attorneys. But so I'd say that one was a teeny bit weak because I didn't, and like all of us who have small firms or who are just started, you don't have somebody you can just ask. You're going to ask lots and lots of questions. And who do you ask? That made me build a very good network to be able to ask questions. And that weakness became a strength as I've progressed in my career. The manager, I think that one, I don't know if anybody, there's no class on management necessarily. My husband had an MBA. I don't remember how much he actually learned about management per se. I feel like most of the management I ever learned was from sort of the hard knocks of trying to be a manager, managing volunteers and part-time people, full-time people in my jobs before being a lawyer. And then also just having mentors, asking lots of questions and such. So I think that the E-Myth talks about technician usually is what we come in being strong, and managers what we need to be able to do to grow. And entrepreneurs, not everybody can hack it as an entrepreneur. Those are, it's even smaller percentage who can do that. And like you said, it's like being able to see the future, being able to adapt and be agile, knowing where the practice of law is going. So yeah, so I guess that would be, that those would all be hard to, it was, I guess probably going in, I had the technician the most, and but I had to learn all of them as I progressed.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's hard to do all three. And this is really why, right? You have to know when to ask for help. And so I'll give you guys an example. It seems like sometimes asking for help, right, it should be easy, but for whatever reason, right, it doesn't always feel comfortable, or it doesn't always feel intuitive. I'll give you a perfect example of this. My office, we just did a team building event recently at Escape Room. And we were in one of those rooms, right, where we were all in the room. We had to figure out the clues. And they told us in the very beginning, you can ask for however many clues you want. There is no penalty for asking for help, right? The very beginning, they said that. And for whatever reason, it kind of just washed over us. And we didn't ask for as much help as we could have. And so we ran out of time. We almost made it out, but as Brandy tells us, almost doesn't count. So again, and I don't really consider myself someone that has a hard time asking for help, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't. I mean, we were told to ask for help. We were told that there was this resource available. We were told that there was no penalty, and still we didn't. So, I think it's just not always an intuitive thing. And I love this, right? This little saying, asking dumb questions is easier than fixing dumb mistakes, because dumb mistakes will cost you a lot, a lot. So always know when to ask for help. And then of course, this has to do with like knowing your strengths, right? Knowing your team strengths, because if you decide to do some of this stuff on your own, right, and you have a support staff, then relying on their strengths is going to be really beneficial to making this a possibility where maybe you could do a hybrid of doing it yourself and hiring a consultant. And then, so I think this is where we were talking about the layers, right? Consulting, you can have a consultation once a month. You can have a retreat once a year. You can have weekly meetings. You can set up your level of consulting, and it doesn't have to be super expensive. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next 2 slides, but just understand there are different levels of consulting. And Ruby here, right, she's a consulting herself, and she offers, a whole bunch of different levels of things as well. But I love when we were preparing for this, you called it, you use the analogy of a chiropractor, right? A chiropractor, you use it when you need it. You can use it as often as you want it. And again, there's the different levels of appointments. So I think that's a really good way of expressing that. I myself personally, I use my consultant once a month, and then we do yearly retreats, and he has, depending on what's going on with the office, we'll schedule him for individual appointments with my office, with my girls, where it's an anonymous conversation. They talk about whatever they feel is relevant in that moment. And then he comes back to me with a report saying, hey, these are the issues that are coming up in your office. So they feel very comfortable speaking up. They know it's anonymous. They know it's not, no one's going to be, no one's going to be, thrown under the bus for speaking up honestly. And I value that honesty so much, because that's what lets me do a better job for them, right? Because if I don't know there's a problem, then I can't fix it. And then, for example, I know Ruby does the round tables that she'll talk about in a little bit. She also does retreats as well. So in a little bit, she'll talk about that information. But just understand, right? You can literally do both. You can do both yourself if you have certain strengths that will help you coordinate that. And you can also hire a consultant to like maybe get you started, or maybe even just focus on a set time frame to complete a task or a goal, right? So if your goal is to have a standing operating procedure manual, or if your goal is to work on your employment manual, you can set small tasks and get organized in that regard, and then everything else will start to fall into place.
Yeah, I agree. I've had several consultants over the period of 12 years, and they're not all created equal, just like us as lawyers, right? So they have different specialties, and it could just be like a one-time thing, or it could be a project, it could be a long-term relationship. So don't be intimidated by it. Find out who you like working with by asking around for recommendations, watch their materials. A lot of them, like even me, I give a free 30-minute chat, just to make sure it's a good fit. That I'm still in the beginning of my business. So later, I'm sure I'm going to change that, just like I did when I had my immigration law firm. But, look into those things, because I mean, a lot of times people will tell me, I wish I would have known this before. And that's, what I'm trying to prevent, or if they can. And that's why I think when people are open to learning, and just being vulnerable, then you're more able to achieve and succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that vulnerability also applies to your team, right? Just because you're the lawyer, or just because you're the owner, doesn't mean that you are perfect. And it's okay to show vulnerability to your team members. So, all right, we're going to move along because we're a little bit behind, but utilizing your skill sets. So how do we use your skill sets to be part of this process for you? Again, know thyself, right? Because the better you know who you are, the better you can hire people in what you lack, right? So whatever strength you have, maybe you continue doing those things. Whatever weakness you have, maybe you hire people in that. And also you could train people, right? If you have someone that is very, OCD organized, then you want to go ahead and maybe put them in an administrative position, right? If you have someone that's very analytical, very, detail oriented, maybe you want to make them a paralegal or law clerk, right? So, I've hired people in my office where they started off as the receptionist, administrative assistant, and, they've gone from paralegal to law clerk. I've had law clerks that went to associate. So it really just depends on what your team as a whole has to offer. And for those of you that are working by yourself right now, right, where it's a true solo situation, we do, definitely encourage that when you are ready to start looking into the hiring process, but you are in a good position because you're starting from scratch, where hiring somebody even just right now, where you haven't hired anybody before, is going to help you, or could help you write down all these processes and start helping you build from the very beginning, because it is hard sometimes to build from when you've already started, right? But if you have a team, if you've already started a while back, you probably have a team, you probably have a couple staff members, then utilizing their strengths is going to really help you kind of put that together. But yeah, you want to know, you want to make sure that you hire people in what you lack. And then I'm very big on this. I know Ruby is too. I know a lot of other attorneys that are big on the team building, but make continuous investments, and not just you, right, and your team, but like your practice. And as Ruby was talking about, right, when she had to go to Dubai, like she just said, let's do it up. Let's just change all the technology, invest what we have to invest to make it happen. So, that's everything, right? That's conferences, CLEs, office comfort. I'm very big on office comfort. I want to make sure my girls are working comfortable, because, they spend 40 hours a week in those chairs, in those desks. And so they spend more time here sometimes than they do at home with their loved ones. So it's important that they're comfortable, right? Resources and books. Ruby has a really cool, there's a link right there. It has a really cool library of book recommendations, that kind of just help you see things a little bit differently. I am currently reading The Power of Habit, and I am like blown away by some of the things that are, that the book is about. It's about habit formation. And so But so there's always things that you can learn outside of immigration, right? Again, we're working on the business, not in the business. And of course, technology. I mean, hopefully during the pandemic, you adjusted and readjusted to, change your technology to match the needs for remote work and for remote employees. But again, you can, this is something that you can do on your own, and you can also get consulting help with. And then I think, Ruby, you referenced those chapters 9, 12, and 19 for that.
Yes, and I just want to say about the hiring and the skill sets. You need to be very clear before you hire. You need to know what you need in that position. And there's been times where I needed an office manager and I just promoted my legal assistant to office manager, and that didn't do very well. Or I promoted somebody internally because they knew 30% of how 40% of how we did things, so they could figure that out. Don't do that. That almost never works out. You really need to go out and ask, what do you really need in this person? Whenever you have an opening, this is even more of an opportunity to ask yourself, what do you absolutely need? And this is when you also can go into your core values and figure out what are the aspects that you want to see in this person that helps you build up your culture. But just make sure that you're looking at it from that perspective as well, not just the skills, but also the core values, because sometimes we need the core values and we can teach for some of those and some of the content and some of those other skills as well. So these are all very, very helpful to making sure that you're always improving and making yourself a better business owner, manager, attorney as you progress.
Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna move on to now, right? So now we've decided whether or not we want to do it on our own, have a consultant, maybe a little bit of both. We know who we are, we know what we have to offer, and we know what we need to improve on for our firm, right? So now, how do we engage our team, right? So again, this is going to apply to individuals that have one or more employees. But if you are in the process where you want to hire, right, this is also going to apply to you. So I know, Ruby, you and I have talked about this in the past. Actually, Ruby and I have presented together on practice management quite a few times, but and I know that we kind of have a similar hiring process. But in my office, we do a 4-step process for hiring. But actually, before we do that, you said something to me during our practice, our organizing meeting, that I completely feel like I felt very heard when you said this. But another popular misconception you said was what?
That more people equals more efficient or more profitable. A lot of times, people say, I have this many people in my staff, or this one. And a lot of people are like, wow, that's awesome. But if you look at some of the ALA marketplace study, there's like a sweet spot. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it was like, the most profitable was when the firms had I think 3 to 5 attorneys and 3 to 5 legal assistants or something like that, as opposed to ones that were a lot bigger. And it's sort of hard to scale the profitability and efficiency with more administration. So just don't beat yourself up if you don't have the biggest firm, because maybe you can still be profitable when you're small and lean. And some people want to be that way. Some people don't want to manage a big team as well. So just keep that in mind. Just be what you want to be, but just know that more doesn't always equal more efficient and more profitable.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So as we were talking, right, we definitely, when we talk about engaging our team, we have to start off with the very, 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 very basic concept, right? We have to have the right people in the right seats. And in order to do that, right, as Ruby just said earlier on, you want to make sure you're identifying what is the need, right? What is the need in the office? Who do you need in that position? What kind of traits are required for that position? And then, of course, I call them non-negotiables, right? What are your non-negotiables? Pretty much for all positions. I have my own process. But we do definitely encourage you to have a rigid hiring process. And then we talked a little bit earlier, right? Hire slow, fire fast. In my office, we do a 4-step process. We do a phone interview with my administrator to set up, to kind of gauge the energy, the excitement. We have a preset of questions, and if she recommends it, then we go to step 2, which is the in-person group interview with me and my administrator. We ask questions, have a couple tests, and then based on the round of hires that we do, we select 2 or 3 of the individuals, and then we invite them to what's called a step 3, which is a working interview, a paid working interview. And then after they do work and they're assigned certain tasks at the office, we typically invite them to lunch so that they can kind of hang out with the office and see how just energy levels are important to us. And then of course references and background checks. So Ruby, what is your process? I know we've talked a little bit about this, but what is your process?
Yeah, that's a good, I like having it all written down, because it always happens that we're, very few people give us a month's notice. It's usually like a couple weeks or maybe worst case less. And being able to have those things in writing makes everything better. So I have that in chapters, I believe in chapters 11 and even some in 12 with the lawyer as manager. So, I mean, we have templates for the postings because a posting is different than the job description. So keep that in mind. A posting is a little bit more abbreviated. If we have to jump in, we could pretty quickly just analyze, do we need this position filled? Is this posting still accurate to what our needs are? And if yes, then we would post it. And then we have, usually it's the office manager pre-screening and has a phone call, double checking these key questions, depending on if it's a admin or more of a legal assistant position or associate, might have different channels, but generally there's a list of like, how much do they know type of questions and practical questions. For legal assistant, for example, we'll ask, we made up like a quiz on immigration matters, and it helps us because a lot of times people say I have 2 years of experience, but 2 years actually is almost maybe 1 year somewhere, half a year. So it's almost like a standardized test in a way. And then we'll also do behavioral questions, and we'll pass them around to a few people in the firm. And then we'll also do references, a background check, writing samples. And sometimes if they're unemployed and they look like a good fit, we might have them in a paid trial period. And I mean, we really want to get the right fit, because, if you have the wrong person, it can cost you thousands and thousands of dollars, especially if you let them go too late in the game. And so you really want to have a good system. And I put a lot of that in the book, and I'm also keep on expanding and improving on that. And one friend once said, like a lot of us are just sort of haphazardly making this HR process up, but like there's people who like, this is their jam, this is their expertise and certification. And so we should learn from them and how to improve our systems. But you also need to have performance reviews on a regular basis.
Yes.
Which is another point here, but like that goes hand in hand, because if you don't have, you need to be checking in with people, making sure they're doing a good job and that they're a right fit. Because if you let them go way late when they should have been let go earlier, it goes back to the whole hire slow, fire fast. You want to make sure that that's where it's a huge waste, right? If you let the person go way late. And a lot of times I'll admit a weakness. The avoiding conflict can come in a little bit, and you might want to give someone too much of an opportunity to stay, even though they shouldn't stay on. It always ends up being that you when you finally let them go, you're grateful that you finally did, and then the whole world is better, sunshine and rainbows, and you should have done it a lot sooner. So
and I think one of my biggest lessons, I think probably in the last couple of years, is there's nothing more discouraging for a good employee than to see a bad employee get away with stuff. There's another word that I would use, but we're being recorded. So
right. And it helps establish your culture. Right.
Yeah.
So
it's very discouraging.
Part of me was like, I know I'm trying to be nice, but nice is not running a business, and that's not what's best for the business. And a lot of times I have to say, what's best for the business, and that's a very good point. What are people seeing? What example am I establishing? Because the thing is, everything we do, it's just like raising children. Everything we do, there's eyes watching us, and what we allow to get away with and what we don't give it away with. And it's really what we do instead of just what we say. There has to be consistency there. And so we have to be consistent and to be a good leader and role model in our business. Another point is have a job description for everyone. When I'm usually in my retreats or my consulting, that's one of the first things I say to people is, do you have a job description for everyone? And they'll say, yeah, no, not really. And so I'm like, okay, well, just go make them do it. Maybe you had one a long time ago, but it hasn't been updated. Have them, dust it off and improve it, and then sit down, give them a 2-week deadline to write them, give them a template of some sort, and then sit down and take a look at them all. And you might be surprised that someone says they do all this stuff, and they say, and this person says they do the same thing, but they're not both doing it. Or you don't, or maybe there's too much staff doing you're a little bit staff heavy for some reason. So you can, or maybe you could reshift some of the duties around. So that is very helpful. Also, when they start talking about raises and bonuses and things like that, then you can, or if you need to add more duties to somebody as they progress, this is very helpful. Cross training was super important during all of being an immigration attorney. I would say you never know what's going to happen. Courts down, interviews up, down, whatever, consular processing happening, what have you. So you want to be cross-train your staff. We started doing something where I called it PLG University, Powers Law Group, where I was teaching the admin staff a lot about immigration, and even some marketing techniques. And I'm also, sometimes I'll just lend them a book. I'll be like, here's a book, take a look at it, about a different, I gave some sales book to the receptionist, and I gave a networking one to the marketing team. And everybody wants to improve, or you want people in your team that want to improve and learn more. So make a system. You could even, if you have your AILA recordings, you could have them watch them and report back. We do that as well, so that people are learning and teaching each other, because how else are you going to teach all your new legal assistants and all your staff, and maybe something and they don't know, and it'll be time consuming to teach them. And going back to what we were saying, make sure you have regular evaluations, performance reviews, templatize and streamline that, so that you're giving each other, you're writing down that feedback, what your goals are. And we've been improving that system. We have one for when you've started, and then we have those who've been here for a while. And then I like having it in writing. The supervisor does it with them. First, the employee fills it out, then the supervisor has a chat with them, and then I check in with them afterwards, as needed. But though that's something we've always been improving over time as well. So your team is everything. We're a professional services industry. So we have to make sure we have the right team, and we're improving them, training them, encouraging them. And it's not enough to just find the right person, which is hard, but you have to grow them, engage them, keep them interested, make sure the right part of the culture. And I mean, that's a great testament to have the right people in the right seats for a long time, and rowing in the same direction. Honestly, you're super powerful if you can get to that point. And a lot of times as a small business owner, we're struggling to get the right people in the right seats rowing in the same direction in tempo. But once we do, it's magical.
Yeah, I mean, you hit everything nail on the head. My office, right? And I loved when you showed up at the PLG University, because I'm like, well, I do something that's slightly different. It's not as fancy as yours, but we do something called case process trainings, where we basically sit down in the office on a Friday morning for 1 hour, and I review a process. So citizenship, asylum, cancellation, whatever it is, just so that we can train them on the wording, we can train them on the concept so that they understand, why certain things happen, how things interplay. And it's always fascinating to see their faces because they're like, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense, right? Like somebody's been like, one of the receptionists or has been scanning mail for a long time and finally understands what a notice of hearing is. You know what I mean? Like something so simple and it allows them to be able to communicate with one another much more fluently as well with clients. So that to me has been, something that I've really enjoyed doing as well. And about keeping them engaged, I'm very big on this as well as Ruby. Training your office or keeping your office engaged and asking for feedback is to us, at least here, is so important because, when it's not a unilateral decision, when it's not a decision that I just made on my own, they're all invested. They're all invested in the success of the process. They're all invested in making it work, in providing, input, in making corrections, and communicating with one another and challenging one another. So, anytime you engage them and you ask for their feedback and their input, you make them a part of the process. You invite them to be a part of the success. And that in its own is very therapeutic, I think, as a team. But also it's something that they feel, that they've contributed towards. So it gives them a feeling of camaraderie, if you will. And I also do believe in spoiling them. I mean, I know, like, not to the effect of, where they're like babied or anything like that, but just, show your appreciation. Like, don't be scared to show your appreciation because as Ruby said, right, like our team is everything. So yeah, engaging. And so you talk about that in chapters 9, 11, and you said a little bit of chapter 12, right?
Yeah. And I did a lot of speeches for ALA about lawyer as manager. So I wrote a chapter on that because, like I said, I don't think we really get true training on management anywhere. I luckily I had managed people when I was like in high school, like volunteers, and then later, like one of my first jobs out of college, and like part-time teachers. So that sort of helped me. But I know that volunteers versus part-time paid versus full-time paid versus like this is the person's real job. It does change depending on what type of situation it is. So I think also having really good role models and mentors that you can call on and ask what you would do in that situation and is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so kind of our last slide and our big one, but we're going to try to cram it in so that you guys have a little bit of Q&A at the end. So the importance of your cookbook. Ruby and I met officially in January of 2019 when we did a presentation at the Practice Management Conference in Las Vegas called How to Prepare Your Cookbook. And then since then we prepared a couple of times on the topic. And so what is your cookbook? So, here's a couple things. It's your magic sauce. It's your recipe for success. It's your vault of processes and systems. It's your standard operating procedures, and it's your employee manual and confidentiality agreements. And so there's not like one big, definitive thing that the cookbook is, but it's essentially how do you organize your office? And the best way to look, the way that I look at it is, what do I have to make my onboarding process easy so that I have the minimal amount of time on training where, my administrator has the minimal time of training where, a case manager that's working on a case has a minimal amount of time on training that new employee. For me, my cookbook, right, is about if I give this to a new hire, right, they're going to have a lot of autonomy to figure things out on their own, right? So, I mean, obviously they're going to go through a training when they go through their probationary period and all that stuff. But the idea, right, is if they have a question, they have a source to go to and find that question or find that answer before they go and ask you or ask somebody else in the office. And that's kind of the way that I've been managing my office. And for me, it's worked. I mean, I don't know. How about you, Ruby?
I mean, for sure that my legal assistant, my senior legal assistant has this like whole thing that she makes the new legal assistants read and write that they understand. And then it's like a guide for them because I mean, a lot of people make their first impressions. The first impressions are very important that first week, first even day or two of being onboarded. And when you have systems in place, I mean, just like this huge weight is listed. When I learn a lot, honestly, it's like a little secret, I guess. When I'm hiring people and I'm talking to people, I just sort of like ask them questions because I'm trying to find out more about them and how they work. But I have a lot of fun actually learning about other law firms by interviewing people. And sometimes they'll say, I don't have a case management software, or we don't have templates, or we don't have this and that. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that why are people making things so hard for themselves? And we need to make sure that you try to put this as much as possible. And that was one of the questions in the Q&A, and it is overwhelming. Yes, it is. But this is what you do. You basically you go high level and you say, what are the systems? And you can even take a look at what we've both done, and I've put some things in the book as well. And then you start just whittling away piece by piece. You delegate, you tell people you've got 1 month to give me a big picture list of the processes that happen in your department, or and then I need to have the final version in the next quarter. Or you get people to help you get there. And if it's just you, well, then you probably have a smaller operation. And you can start putting things, and then as you hire more people, you can have them help you. Like, for example, I don't have an executive assistant manual, but I'm having my current one put that together. And then the next one will keep improving that, and so on and so forth. So you want to put as many systems in place. You sort of have your table of contents or your cookbook of all the ones that you have, make it easy to find. There's programs out there where you can put them all in one place, or you could just pretty simply just put them in like some Word documents or in your Dropbox or somewhere. And you want to review them on a regular basis, because let me tell you, if they're just in writing somewhere and nobody lives, breathes, reviews them, then they create no value to you. You can brag all you want that you have them written down, but if they're not using them and you're not being used for onboarding, training, or reflecting on our things being done properly, then there's no value to that. So don't brag about them, but then don't use them. Or if someone says, well, where are they? And that means you got to make sure people can find them. So these are just some of the things that you need to have. And I've talked a lot about HR. Like, there's a lot of things like offer letters, or performance reviews, warning letters, termination letters, all of those things. If you have a lot of those in templates, it just makes life so much easier, so that when things happen, you just pull it up and you make a couple changes. So the funny thing is, we're doing this a lot for like our clients and our legal work, but a lot of times we don't put the same amount of effort in running our businesses. And so working on the business will make our life so much easier. And so allocating some time towards it is definitely a greater value.
Yeah.
And like I said, delegate, get people to help you. Like, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of that, and give them a deadline. Okay. Because it's human nature that you'll take as much time as you're given. So if you don't give them a deadline, then you'll take that much amount of time. So
no, and I think and I saw the question too from Laura regarding, should I I think that was one of the questions, right, Laura? You asked about whether or not to, shut it down or do it piece by piece. Again, I second Ruby, but I definitely think that if you have a team, utilize them, right? Utilize them as much as possible so that you're not doing everything by yourself. When I did this for my firm, I shut down my office for 2 weeks back in November of 2017. And ever since then, I've just been delegating to my HR, my administrator, to update the system. So I created the SOP, the employee manual, all that stuff officially, right? Because I had pieces here and there, but I combined it all together November of 2019 or 17, sorry. And then now it's, she spends probably less than an hour a week updating our SOP and our documents. So that initial investment is going to be very important. How you do that, of course, it's based on your availability and of course, your staff members, and that's all the things you have to analyze. All right, so then, and then again, right? So the cookbook, I think for me, something that's been very helpful is it allows for accountability on both ends, right? Consistency across the board with all employees, consistency on processes for all clients. And internally, right, it minimizes the I didn't know or the it's not my job mentality, which I know every single person in this practice management CLE has heard at some point or another from one of their employees. So this allows for that level of accountability, which is it's gonna, allow you to be more successful.
I mean, if you think about it, it's sort of like we're a computer system. If everybody knows what they're supposed to do without having to have a meeting about it, like that's the ideal situation. Like, when this happens, and this function happens. It's like I took C++ back in high school, so I'm thinking like that right now. But this happens and that happens, and then like you don't have to have a meeting every time. If the only point of having a meeting is if the situation wasn't written out and people are not clear, or there's a permutation that wasn't previously thought about. And you need to have sort of like a big picture planning idea. I mean, of course, there's the other types of meetings where you're informing each other, but in terms of procedures, so my office manager has been working on the mother of all operation procedural manual, like I guess the cookbook, because we'd always been writing them in sort of different departments, but we wanted to put them all together in one place. And again, this is different than just your employment manual. Employment manual is about certain employee and HR matters that everybody would read and agree to and understand. But the procedural manual systems and templates, that's another thing, another document or process that you need to have as well.
All right, Ruby. So I think we've
covered a lot.
Yeah, we've covered a lot. And so now is the fun thing with the raffle, and I figured out how to do it. I downloaded the Excel from the registration, so I have numbers. I have a number. So we are about to raffle off Ruby's Build and Manage Your Successful Immigration Law Practice book. The ALS Central Florida chapter is going to be donating or raffling that off for free for you. So Ruby. Well, the question was going to be actually, so I think we should still do the question, but you're going to pick a number, okay? And, we have, I think we have right now, we have 44 participants right now. So pick a number from, hold on, let me open up the Excel real quick again, as long as this button moves here. But I do want you guys to answer this question for yourselves, okay? Go ahead and answer this question for yourselves and put it on the chat, because if you say it, you speak it into existence. So what is one thing that you will commit today to do in the next 2 weeks to improve your office structure or workflow? Put it in the chat while I figure out this Excel situation. Ruby, read off their answers.
Delegate. That's true. Writing your cookbook. Closing out old files. Yay. Closing out old files is actually really therapeutic, as someone said as well, but it's also good because then we put all those contacts in our newsletter we had maybe not put in. We also ticklered a whole bunch of new business. So I thought that closing cases was going to be like a losing business situation, but I found I was making lemonade out of the situation and found ways that it actually turned into a business opportunity. Finish the SOP, close old files, delegate, close old out files, writing down the hiring process and policies. I'm going to try to list some of the big picture high level systems so I can start to understand a flow of our systems and how to streamline them. Yes.
Very good.
Read our full system flow from case open to case closed. Just sit down and brain dump everything. Yeah. And you can also use Otter AI if you want to do the whole like talk and type. You could record yourself and then run it through Otter AI, or you could do that and then you can put it in writing. So make it easier. Finalize the job descriptions for each employee. I'll set aside time during our weekly office meetings to do a short Q&A on different case types. Let's see, prepare templates for 2 case types. And, just the other thing, like, Greg Siskin's book with it is called the cookbook. It has a lot of the templates about the list of documents, questionnaires, and templates. So, that came out this summer. Use that for your substantive law stuff. But what we're talking about here is a lot of things that, you have to tailor. You might be able to get some templates from some people, but you need to tailor to your firm. Take Andrea's advice and show one case process a week, right? So my SOPs for my writing teams, implement temperature checks and process reviews so we can clean up our processes. Marketing. Okay, and when you say these one-word things like delegate or marketing or what have you, you need to be more specific, right? We want to be a SMART goal, be specific, measurable, attainable. So think along those lines. And we're not completely done. Once we do give out choosing the number and who's going to get the book, I also have a couple ways you can stay connected, and we have some upcoming events that you wanted to share as well, right?
Yes. All right, Ruby. So go ahead and pick a random number between 2 and 97. 2 and 97.
Okay.
We did not practice this. Ruby and I have not. We're not. This is not collusion. Okay. So go ahead and pick a number randomly.
Okay. 56.
56. Okay, that's gonna be John Usher. John Usher, are you here? John Usher.
Sheila Ortega says yes. Okay.
Okay. Got it.
We're gonna trust that you're really.
All right, we're gonna trust that you are John Usher, Mr. Usher. All right, I do have your email address. I will send you that information after the event. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're gonna wrap up. I know that we have. Let's see.
We have a couple slides on some events. You have events, I have some. I'm just saying how to stay connected. And also for those who are interested in the book and didn't win today, you still can buy it. I'll put in the code, a link, and a 20% off code. So let me put that in the chat for you. And then I also offer a 30-minute free chat if you want to talk about your law practice management issues. So
so we have. Wait, so I have a different Florida barcode than you do, ma'am. The sheet that I got. Yeah.
Sorry, I read that from. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you got the from the Florida.
I read it from the PowerPoint. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's 2107214N. That's for Florida. Go ahead and get that. And then, so I know the Q&A kind of, we're out of time really for Q&A, but our contact information is on here. Ruby's is on here. Mine is on here as well. And then for the Central Florida chapter, guys, we do have 3 CLE events already planned. You should have already gotten an email from me. I'll be posting it. We have one for technology coming up, the do's and don'ts of cybersecurity. The January 25th, we have one for financial structure for your 2, 5, 10 year and retirement plan. And then in March, we have a mental illness awareness CLE regarding work-life balance, myth or bust. And then please save the date, be on the lookout, or BOLO. I've never heard that phrase before, but when I was Googling little phrases, that came up. We are scheduled we're finalizing the details of our 4th annual practice management conference set in Orlando, Florida. The Florida Citrus Club is usually where we have it at. It'll be in mid or end of April of 2022. It is going to be a 2-day event on Friday and Saturday. And I'm really excited because this year we're going to be hosting a little bit different. The morning tracks are going to be CLEs, and the afternoon tracks, we're going to actually have working clinics. So you're going to have an opportunity to actually work with different practice management experts on creating certain processes for your office, whether that is a job description, a process checklist for clients on, let's say, a citizenship, or an internal checklist for your individual office members. So I'm very excited about that. Ruby's going to be there. She's already agreed to be on there with us, so she'll be on there. And then so again, as she stated, she does host these deep dive roundtables. I actually spoke there, what was it, in August or July? I don't remember. regarding some practice management, awesome stuff. She does have a Facebook group called Power Up Your Practice. So if you do not follow it, go ahead and follow it now. And then there's all these ways you can stay connected with her as well.
Yeah, let's just go to the next slide. I think it
Yeah.
has so the next the monthly retreat, monthly roundtables, we're going to have one on marketing with Stacy Burke. She is an attorney that just works with lawyers on how to market. So she's going to do hers on October 13th at 12 p.m. Central. That's going to be coming out. So if you're on their Facebook group, you'll get those, or if you get added to our newsletter, if you email me, I can add you. The other one, we're going to do one on technology. We haven't firmed it up exactly, but Nadine's going to be the speaker of the technology immigration practitioners Facebook group. And so that's going to be exciting on November 3rd. And then Show Me the Money or something on the finances is going to be with Ruth McChesney as well. And that's going to be on December 8th. So we've got a really cool lineup for the rest of the year. And these are recorded. You can register. You'll get the recordings. We also put them on our YouTube Power Strategy group YouTube. You can have all of the last recordings as well. And so you can get your hands on those, and there's lots of awesome learning opportunities. And then the next slide is of the let's see, I was going to put that link in there. We have the different ways to stay connected, including the YouTube and the Facebook group. And then the next slide is, and if you want to watch those other recordings, we've had video content, we had about the cookbook, we had lots of really cool stuff. And then the Facebook group as well is how you can get up to date all the time on the different things. And we have a retreat, which is November 5th and 6th. It's over Zoom, and I'm going to go over all the elements of the book, all different areas. We have 10 modules, and it's in a group of 5 or 6 people. So it's very intimate. And we also do pre-retreat and post-retreat chats. And the first 2 people who register get a copy of the book as well. And so you can learn more about that there. So thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Those are all the modules that we'll be covering, which is pretty much a lot of the book. And you know what's really nice about it, whether you just started your firm or you've had it for a long time, you do a survey, so you figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are, going back to what we said in the beginning, and then it helps you figure out where to prioritize your energy and time. And sometimes you walk away saying, wow, I'm a lot better at XYZ than I thought I was, or, oh, I came in thinking I need to fix this, but I really need to fix that. And then you also get to speak with fellow other business owners and to sort of learn from them and build a community as well. So that's great.
Yeah. Well, Ruby, thank you so much for your time. We know you're very busy, but we are very thankful. So we're gonna send that book over to Mr. Usher, and then if you saw on the chat, Ruby actually went ahead and put a discount code for you guys as well. There's a 20% discount code in there. So get your book, get organized, start asking questions, start joining us in all these practice management CLEs, and we hope to see you thrive. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for organizing. It was an honor and a pleasure to be here.
All right, Ruby, take care. Bye, guys.
Bye.